Our next guest is one of the all-time geniuses. He's an 11-time Emmy-winning director who's given us over 1,000 episodes of iconic television, including Taxi, Cheers, Frasier, Will and Grace, Friends. This is his memoir. It's called Directed by James Burrows. Please say hello to Jimmy Burrows. It's great to have you here.
Fine, you're higher than me.
That's how we do it in late-night television.
You want to switch?
With all the stuff you've done on television, you told me you'd never been on a late-night talk show. I said, well,
no, I have not.
I'd love to have you as a guest on mine because nobody has better stories. No one has had a more interesting career, and I mean no one in the world than you have. I mean, it's really remarkable.
I've had a very interesting and successful life, you know?
Yeah. You know, Cheers, which obviously you were a huge part of, is, you know, the theme song is You Want to Be Where Everybody Knows Your Name. And everybody does know your name because they know it from this credit that they see at the end of all of these great shows. And now I wanted everyone to see your face and your head and all that stuff for a change as well.
You see a lot of my head.
Yes. One of the great experiences of my life was working with you on Live in Front of a Studio Audience. We had a Norman Lear. We restaged some of his famous shows, The Facts of Life, All in the Family, The Jeffersons, and Different Strokes. And this was live, 2 episodes, and I can't even begin to tell you how impressed I was watching you. Usually I like to kind of like be in charge of things, and I instantly recognized I am not in charge of this, and nor should I be. Because you, were you nervous doing that?
I was petrified.
You were petrified.
You know, I almost sang Gloria Gaynor's song. That's how.
You didn't seem petrified.
I was. The shows I normally do are 4-camera film shows, where you shoot it, every scene twice, and then you cut it and edit it and stuff like that. This was live on the air.
Live on the air.
Live on the air, so I had to be in the booth snapping. I can't snap anymore. I have a clicker that looks like a frog, and that's when the TD takes the shot. But I was really petrified.
Not only was it live, we had great actors, but many of whom had never done a sitcom before.
Right.
Never been in that situation before, and they were all nervous. But then you, like, at certain times, you would close your eyes and listen to what was going on, which is interesting, and that's something that you do.
Well, comedy's all about rhythm. My father was a playwright and director on Broadway. And when he was doing a straight play, when he was directing a straight play, he would walk behind the scenery and he'd listen. And if he heard a pause, he knew nobody was dancing, so he was in trouble. No. So, you know, it's important to hear the rhythms. That's what I listen for. I don't worry about the cameras too much in the rehearsal process. But, you know, once we're shooting, I got to watch the cameras. That's all I can do.
There are a lot of great stories in the book, but I do think this is like one of the most educational things I've ever read about television. It is, there's so much to be learned here. Let's start with Taxi, because that was that your, like, your first, one of my favorite shows. I've probably seen every episode of Taxi 11 times, you know? It's just one of those shows that if it comes on, I do not turn away. I am locked in. And something I've always wondered about, even before we met, what was it like when you were casting Taxi and Danny DeVito walks in? A guy that most people didn't know as an actor at all at that time, to audition for the part of Louis De Palma.
He walked in with the script. He threw the script. It was a room with the producers and me and some of the writers. He walked in, threw the script on the table, and said, "Who wrote this?"
And at that point, did you know right away that he was going to be the guy?
Look at him.
Yeah.
Look at him. You know what? He brings, just looking at him, he brings so much to that character.
Did you have the cage that Louis would work out of? He was a taxi dispatcher, and then he would be in this cage, and he'd be, yelling at everybody through. Was that built for the actor, or was that the way you had it planned?
No, that was the way we had it planned.
That was the way you had it planned?
Yeah.
Wow.
The interesting thing in the pilot, when we shot the pilot, when I was rehearsing it, he came out in the first scene. And that was no good because we didn't establish his character right away. So I think we went 2-3 scenes in, establishing this mean SOB in the cage, and then he comes out and everybody goes, "Oh my God!"
It's so brilliant, and it makes so much sense when you explain it. But it's also something that 99.9% of people would never think about, revealing him like that.
Well, no, I mean those writers. There's Jim Brooks and Ed Weinberger and Stan Daniels and Dave Davis. They were out of MTM, which was the hotbed of comedy then, and they wrote a great script, and we had a great cast.
What a cast that was.
Interplanetary cast.
I mean, yeah, yes, it was interplanetary. Reverend Jim Ignatowski, played by Christopher Lloyd, who then people went on to play Doc Brown in the Back to the Future movies and so many things. Another guy who is like, you just can't imagine anybody else playing that part.
No, I mean, he was in the original Cuckoo's Nest on Broadway with Danny, so Danny knew him.
Ah, so is Danny the one that...
I don't know if he's the one, but Danny said he's a really good actor. And then, I'll never forget his audition. Chris Lloyd walked into the room with exactly the clothes he wore in the show. Torn sneakers, torn jeans, torn jean jacket, a blue shirt, and his hair like this. So he walks in, and we're looking at him. He starts reading, and everybody's on the floor because he was hysterical. So this was the first year. He was a guest star the first year because he was hired to play. He was Reverend Jim, who was going to marry Latka and a hooker to keep Latka in the country.
Right.
So every day of rehearsal, Chris Lloyd came in with the same outfit on, and I'm going, does he have it? Has he worked recently? Does he have a job? What's it? And then we shot the show. It was through the roof. That character, was through the roof. And then we always had a party after shoot night on Friday, and we were upstairs, and the cast was young, so the party was happening. And in walks Chris Lloyd in cowboy boots, tight jeans, a white shirt, and I said, "Oh my God, this is amazing. This is amazing." That's how good an actor he was.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And of course, I mean, listen, I don't even want to I don't want to brush by Judd Hirsch, and the cast was unbelievable on that show. But you had Andy Kaufman on that show. And he is, by any account, a comedy genius. And
oh my God.
Also, probably one of the more difficult people to work with. Is that an
I
accurate
didn't find
assessment?
him difficult at all.
For you, he was not?
No, Andy had day-night reversal. So, as most comics do, he was up till 5 in the morning and wouldn't come until 1 o'clock. So, but when he came in, he knew his lines. He had a photographic memory. And, we worked around that. So, and he was great in the show.
He had this alter ego, and people who know his work know that he had this guy, Tony Clifton, this character that he played. And sometimes his friend would play it, and they'd trick people, and it was
Bob
the whole
Zamuda,
thing.
yeah.
And he insisted that. Well, what happened when you fired Tony Clifton from the show?
Well, yeah, Tony Clifton. The only way Andy would do the show is if his alter ego could do one episode of Taxi.
Right.
So we wrote an episode where Tony Clifton would play Louis De Palma's brother. And it was the day, we started rehearsal the day that Bucky Dent hit the home run for the Yankees to go into the World Series. And it was, Tony and I were watching at 9 a.m. in the morning. That's what time we came in. And all of a sudden, the prop room door opens where we were watching, and here's Tony Clifton screaming at us at 9 a.m. Screaming at us. He had a wig, and he had a brocade tuxedo, and he had a ruffled shirt. He's screaming, "Let's get to work, let's get to work." So we got to work, and it was Andy Kaufman playing Tony Clifton playing Louis De Palma's brother. Not gonna work.
No, yeah.
So I told Ed Weinberger, he came down to see, and then we realized we had to let Tony go. So he called his manager, and the manager said, Tony's not going to be happy. And Andy's really not going to be happy. So the deal of firing him was he had to be fired in front of the entire cast with a prostitute on each knee.
Did he provide the prostitutes, or did somebody go get those for him?
Somebody went out on the street. No, I don't know. So Tony comes in the next day, and the girls are walking around, and Ed Weinberg comes down to fire him, and he says, "You're fired," and Tony says, "I'm not leaving." "You're fired. I'm not leaving." "You're fired. I'm not going." So I'm standing there with Judd and Tony Danson and Jeff Conaway, and we're watching this. And Jeff Conaway gets so angry. He starts to charge the stage. And both Tony and I grabbed him and threw him up against the wall, and I said to him, "You can't ruin this moment. This is guerrilla theater. You're never, ever going to see this again." So he calmed down. Ed said, "You're fired." "No, I'm not leaving." "You're fired." "Yeah, I'm not leaving." And Judd said, "Okay, I'll play, I'll act." He went and picked Tony, Andy, whatever one, picked him up, threw him off the soundstage on the lot, screaming and yelling. Security guards came to take him off. The next Monday, Andy Kaufman came in as if nothing had happened.
It's funny when you imagine this happening like in a regular job, like if everyone worked at a Costco warehouse.
He was the bravest comic I've ever seen.
Really? Wow.
I mean, you can Google his work, and it's extraordinary.
He took great pleasure in upsetting the audience. Like he loved it. He just loved it.
And comics are not that brave all the time.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and it's also, it can be very uncomfortable. But he reveled in it.
He reveled in it.
If you had, of the many episodes of television you've directed, you had one episode that you would, put in a time capsule or something like that, which one would it be?
The pilot of Cheers.
The pilot of Cheers, which is, the script is great. The pilot episode is, it's like a perfect pilot.
It's in the vernacular now.
Is it?
Oh yeah. People read that pilot all the time if they're new in the business and want to know what you have to do to have a successful pilot. And Sam and Diane are in the vernacular now. I mean.
Yeah, right. The will they or won't they is a Sam and Diane thing.
Yeah.
And it was interesting reading the decision-making process where you go like, oh, people love this game, that there's this romance that might happen. Do we blow it if we make it happen? What do we do, And then they break up, and is this going to be a problem? And it's just interesting to be on the other side of that.
Yeah, at the end of the first year, we had that show where they kissed for the first time. So coming into the second year, there was no way we would not get them together, because if Sam alone can't bet a woman in a year, he's not a Lothario,
right.
He's nothing. So we got them together. We got terrible reviews. You've ruined the show. Everything, we ruined the show. And then they began to see the dynamic of this relationship, and it drove the show for 5 years. Shelley Long, playing that character, was unbelievable, and Teddy was unbelievable. And the chemistry...
Yeah. One of my favorite characters on Cheers, and every actor is so great, and there's so many, people who just, you never forget, was Coach, Nicholas Colasanto, who passed away, after second season?
In the middle of the third season.
Middle of the third season, he passed away. And he wasn't replaced necessarily, but his spot was taken by Woody Harrelson.
Right.
Who played Woody on the show. And this was at the time, nobody knew who Woody Harrelson was, and nobody knew he would go on to become this great actor who even played Archie Bunker in the special we did together. Right. What was Woody like? Was joining an established cast like that, what was Woody like at that time?
Well, Woody was, he brought testosterone to that stage.
Yeah.
He was fit and rugged, and, I had him, when he entered, he had a couple lines with Sam, And then I had him jump over the bar. And Woody could do that.
Mm-hmm.
And Teddy went, great. Teddy, saying, I can do that too. It was not pretty when Teddy tried to do it.
You took Ted Danson, who played Sam Malone, who was a Boston Red Sox pitcher who had an alcohol problem and wound up drinking his way out of the league. He'd never been to a baseball game before you took him to one.
I had to educate him in the sports world. Teddy went to Carnegie Mellon. He was, he was a farceur, really. But I educated him. In fact, in the first year, we had Fred Dreyer on the show. Fred Dreyer played a sportscaster. Mm-hmm. And he would come in, and I would say to Ted, watch him. Watch him. He's a peacock. Watch how he struts. Watch how he looks at the women. Watch how he grabs his crotch. No, really. I said, this is what Sam Malone is. So Teddy watched him, and he watched how he was a peacock, and he watched how he looked at women, and then he went over and grabbed Fred's crotch.
One of my favorite scenes from Cheers, maybe my favorite scene from Cheers, is where Coach is teaching Sam how he learns things. They're trying to learn about a country. Do you know what I'm getting at?
Albania.
Albania, yeah. And there's that little song, and I from the first time I saw it, I will never forget it. Albania, Albania, it borders on the Adriatic. The terrain is mountainous, and their chief export is chrome. And how do you even write that? It's so good. There is one thing that I want to bring. I'll show this picture, first of all, of you guys watching the finale, the Cheers finale, which was when television was different at that time. There you guys are in a hotel room around the world's smallest table. Oh, I think we have it on the big screen now. Here it is. There's everybody. There's the cast of Cheers, or most of the cast of Cheers. And you right there with the... how many people watched that finale?
86 million?
86 million people were tuned in. And the ending is just great of that show. It couldn't be better than it was.
People hated us, though.
Well, for what?
Because you end a sitcom, you take away somebody's pacifier. You know, yeah. they will never be at peace with that when you take that away from them.
Yeah.
It's just, but it was time. Ted called us and said he didn't want to do another year. And we thought about, what we could, if we could do it. And then, no, it's Sam's bar. It'll always be Sam's bar. So, we wrapped it up.
Yeah. So it's Ted's fault.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Friends, which is a show that is obviously was hugely popular when it was on, but is just as popular now as when it was on, which is crazy. It might be the most, after it had originally aired, it might be the most popular, that and Seinfeld, sitcom in the world. Maybe that and The Simpsons and Friends. And did you ever imagine it would still be popular in the year 2022?
No. I knew when I was rehearsing the kids the first time, because they were 6 unknowns. Courtney was a little bit kind of known, but...
from the Bruce Springsteen video.
And she was also on Family Ties.
Oh, right. Yeah, she was Alex. Yes.
Yeah. So, but once I started to rehearse and started to see that, we never really read with them together when they auditioned. But when I started to rehearse, they had this symbiotic relationship. They liked one another, and they would contribute. They would, and I enable that. That's how I work. I work through kindness, and I work like anybody can say anything they want about the show. And to me, if I direct you to do this and you don't like it, tell me. And if you do something, if you suggest something and I don't think it's right, I'll tell you. And it's such a writer's medium, because the writers work hard on that show. You have to respect what they do. So you have to show the writers, when you run through, you have to show them what they wrote. And then after that, if you have some suggestions, then you do it. You don't do the suggestions right away, because the writers are going to get upset.
Right.
But that pilot, when I read that script, and when it was shot, 99% of that script that I read went out on the air.
Really?
Marta and David. I mean, I've been lucky with all these great shows, but the writing has been extraordinary.
Yeah. Well,
You know?
I don't know that it's luck. I think that when you have the best writers, they're seeking the best director, and that's probably, maybe it was luck at the beginning, but, and I do want to, there's one thing I did not like in the book, I'll be honest with you, because that's our relationship. There's something we don't like, we talk about it, and we don't pretend it. Why did this have to be in the book? That didn't need to be in. That was unnecessary.
He came to us, he was crying. Because of his relationship with you.
Even back then?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
I mean, don't you worry about disease? You know, it's like you're right. Anyway, that was Will and Grace, right?
That was Will and Grace.
Did you ever imagine after Friends you'd then have another humongous hit that endured and actually, in the case of that show, made a big impact on the country in showing gay people together? In fact, we have an experience with our now president.
I did. We never, Max Mushnick and David Cohen wrote that show. And when I read the pilot, I said, I have to do this show. It was extraordinarily well written, and the characters were a little bit different than I had worked with before. I mean, you had these four kind of eccentric characters, and but I had to do it. And we never set out to proselytize or to advocate for gay people. We just did a show about gay people that happened to be funny. So the great moment for me was I used to drive carpool for my daughter. She was a 13-year-old daughter, and I would pick up the kids during the early 2000s. Pick up the kids, we'd drive into school, and invariably those 12 and 13-year-olds would say to me, "What's on Will and Grace this week?"
Wow.
So I knew that they were, there was no bias there. They just enjoyed the show.
Right.
So that was great. And then Joe Biden, my wife and I went to see Hamilton, and he was there that night. Not back in the 1700s, that Hamilton play.
The later one.
The later one.
Uh-huh.
And I went up and introduced myself, and he was so praiseworthy of the show, and it made me cry. He was so sweet about it.
Imagine Joe Biden watching Will and Grace. It's weird. You'd think Matlock would be his show, Our friend Norman Lear turns 100 next month.
I know.
100 years old. What a guy.
It's amazing.
Your dad worked with Norman.
My dad worked with Norman, yeah.
Wow.
It was, people who work with my dad are few and far between now.
Yeah.
And to be with Norman, it was such an honor. And to getting that, I think it was an email from you where you proposed me directing.
Yeah. We immediately decided, we have to ask Jim Burrows we had you got Norman Lear, you had, these great actors, Jamie Foxx and Woody Harrelson and Marissa Tomei. Really just an unbelievable cast. And we wanted the best guy there is, and that's you, and there's no question about it. And
I was honored. I was honored. I had worked with Norman once before. I did a pilot Norman did about his dad called Pop with Charlie Durning and B. Arthur.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I like to say two male leads.
B would laugh at that.
I know she would.
Yes, that's right.
Jimmy, Jimmy, like that. And so I had worked with him then, but it wasn't very successful. So when the opportunity came to do the live show, it was just, I couldn't pass it up.
Who is the greatest sitcom actor of all time?
My God, I'll get in such trouble.
Yeah.
Maybe I should name somebody I haven't worked with.
That's good. Yes, go ahead. Yes.
Jamie Farr.
Jamie Farr. What? Radar. I mean, what? No, not Radar.
Klinger.
Klinger. Yeah,
No,
Klinger.
no,
yeah.
no.
Jamie Farr. He was good.
He was good.
Yeah.
Probably Carol O'Connor for me.
Carol O'Connor.
Embodied. You know, that's such a tough role.
Yeah.
Such a tough role. He says things that are abhorrent, and yet you forgive. And so I think that. And then the ones I've worked with, there's, you know, Teddy and Judd Hirsch and Billy Gardell on Mike and Molly. Sweet and so nice. And, you know, there are, I can't go on because I'll leave people out.
Yeah, right. Well, you already have.
I did.
Yes. As a matter of fact, if you go on, you won't leave people out, but let's leave some people out. Well, it's so great to have you here, and you got to read this book. If you like TV, if you watch TV, you're going to love this. It's called Directed by James Burrows. Jimmy Burrows, everybody. Thank you. We'll be right back with Barty Strange. If you like that video, click subscribe, and we'll be together until one of us dies.